So I wanted to just touch base a little bit about what the social work role is. What does it mean to be a social worker, especially in my setting, which is in a medical clinic? The social work in itself is really deeply rooted in some core fundamental values of social justice, self-determination, which is a huge one when we're talking about a loved one with memory loss and they're having some changes in respect to their own decision making. So that fine balance between still making a decision for oneself or a loved one having to make a decision for them. Um, there's a lot of different aspects that a social worker looks at, very much a person in the environment, looking at the family system and how we can empower not only the family, but the individual itself. So in this case, it's the person who's having memory loss, the person with dementia. Um, so many times when people come to the clinic, they are surprised when they see a social worker. They're not quite sure what to expect. Are they going to ask me questions? They might be a little bit defensive, thinking that a social worker is coming in questioning their abilities and things of that nature. But it's really a support. Um, Many times we really are the bridge between one person, for example, let's say driving, that beginning initial conversation of maybe that person shouldn't be driving anymore to the act of no longer driving. There are multiple conversations that are had with the person, with family. How do we approach the feelings associated with taking away some of those individual rights of that person? It gets pretty complicated. And that's where social work really shines, I like to think, where we can help families process through that, because it is huge weight to be responsible to make decisions for someone else, especially if that someone else has changed over time and maybe what they had wanted is no longer in their best interest. So a lot of heavy decision making that could be really, really helped by talking to a social worker. Um, so with that being said, I know Sherry sent me some topics that I think in some of the groups that you all had about maybe some questions or certain struggles in certain areas. So I'll just kind of work down the list and hopefully we get through them all. I'm more curious and hopeful to answer any questions that you all or struggles that you are all facing. Um, the first is the differences between large and small gatherings. A lot of this is going to be dependent on your loved one, who they are as a person, what their style of socialization has always been. Do they come from a large family? Were they extroverted or more introverted? Has the disease caused a change where now overstimulation is too much and you're finding that they become more agitated with too much stimulation? So all of those factors really come into play. The benefits of either one, so a large gathering, if it's something that all family members are on the same page and are aware of the situation, your loved one might enjoy having that social interaction. There's a lot of positive aspects to connecting with others. There is emotional memory that is really well preserved. And so if you have really beautiful interactions with grandchildren or neighbors or friends or extended family, you're building on the enrichment of that person. So those are the positive aspects of that. The benefit of a smaller gathering, certainly is more intimate. And the things that will help you kind of decide of which path should I choose, should I keep it small or large, is really testing the limits of your loved one. So maybe going to a restaurant during lunchtime when it's busy. If you're finding that that person is not handling it well, kind of like eyes darting everywhere, maybe getting a little bit upset, very fidgety. These are kind of indicators for you to know that maybe that person's a little bit too overstimulated. If you're really wanting to go to a restaurant, maybe pick a less busier time, earlier lunch or a late lunch. Maybe see if you can pick an area of the table that's a little further in the back, not so overwhelming. Outdoor seating, these are things that to kind of accommodate if you still want to get out and about with a loved one. But I think at the end of the day, really, it's more about um, having a real honest conversation with ourselves and making sure that the choice that we're making is in the best interest of our loved one. A lot of the times I'll see someone say, but I think they would really love it if they went here. I think it would make them really happy. And that might have been true maybe 1 or 2 years prior. But unfortunately, as things change, that may no longer be the truth. The truth might be more quieter, more intimate settings will have more meaning, will be less overwhelming. So that might be, just take heart and know that when you are making these choices, to think, is it really in the best interest of my loved one so that I can have that meaningful connection with them? The other one was staying at home with a loved one or who has dementia or going out. Um, I think we talked about that a little bit just now in the sense of deciding, an outing could be a lot of different things. It could be, going to the park, which is really relaxing and lovely. At least in Florida, I don't know about up north, but there might be some areas where you could have just, a nice picnic, a very simple meal, a dessert together. It's creating meaningful moments is what's the important thing. Um, so doing that is kind of the focus when we're talking about holidays. It's kind of creating the experience, right? Traditionally, we're so used to kind of the big and the heavy and a lot of decoration. There's a lot of traditions attached to that. A lot of people love holiday times because they love putting out, all of the gear and the getup, which I'm guilty as well. But sometimes that might be too much. That might be too overwhelming. So again, the overstimulation is kind of thinking about that. Um, with the food choices, the menu choices, just going back to the restaurants when you're going out to eat. Um, the theme here is keeping it simple. We've had families before where they've kind of done a lot of research before going out to the restaurant. They would look at the menu list, and they might even create one for their loved one, their own that they create, and they only put 2 or 3 items on it. And when they go to the restaurant, they present them with that menu. It's like their own doctored menu, just so that they can participate in the act. There's a lot of different things that you can do to simplify the experience for your loved one and for yourself. There's little cards that say, please be patient or please excuse my loved one, they have dementia. So if you have someone who is getting a little bit overwhelmed, that way the server can be a little more patient or the host can help out in some way. But it's the act of communicating that with the staff there, certainly. Now, when we talk about traveling, how many, you can just raise your hand, how many are traveling out of their home or going somewhere for the holidays? Okay, so we've got 2, not too many. All right. Well, the traveling part, it's wonderful if you're traveling by plane. If you find that you can do early check-in. Sometimes your doctor could even write a letter stating that there's a medical condition. Can we bypass and just kind of quickly have access to boarding the plane? Many times that they do that. We write letters for our families for those sorts of situations. But I think the biggest key is wherever you are going, being prepared. If you're visiting family, and friends, it's certainly a personal decision on how much you want to disclose about the changes that are happening with your loved one, but it takes a village, and I think the more that people are aware of what's happening, the better they're able to help you, the better they're able to provide that experience for them as well. Um, Sometimes there are family dynamics that make that tricky. Sometimes there are families that question a diagnosis or don't think it's, as bad. Um, and sometimes there's just water under the bridge, and the holiday times can be difficult. Um, it's a personal decision. Again, scaling back to what's in the best interest of my loved one, what's going to help them to have a smooth experience. Because if they have a smooth experience, you will have a smooth experience. When a loved one is in a more moderate late stage, you really start reaching um, mirroring, which means if you are feeling overwhelmed or anxious, that really starts to kind of rub off on your loved one. Um, Unintentionally, of course, but it happens. And so all of those things can certainly create um, frustration, overall. And obviously that's not the experience that the person wants to have. So it could be either an email, it could be written, it could be a phone conversation, um, even like a Zoom meeting where you talk about where your loved one is at. What are some of their favorites? What are some of their calming strategies? If you're going to someone's home, if there's an area that could be kind of like a quiet spot in the event the person gets overwhelmed that you could retire to. And we've had one family, it was a family reunion, and they were pretty adamant about going. And this person was a bit on the fence on whether it was a good idea. They were pretty far along, and they had multiple incidences of overstimulation. And you could see that the sundowning was a big aspect, and they were having a hard time, but they decided to move ahead with it. And they did the family meeting or the family gathering, and it worked out. But certainly, they prepared by having a spot in the house that was just for their loved one that they could go retire to and refresh and rejuvenate, or just have quiet time away from the loud sounds, the laughter, the music playing or the TV on. All of that is sensory overload overall for someone who has dementia, especially as they are progressing. Um, Now, some things to anticipate. We get this a lot when a family decides, we want to go ahead and have this vacation, or we want to see family members. This might be, the last time that we can travel. What can I expect? Certainly there's going to be a period of confusion that can happen. Um, Structure and routine will be your best friend. And when that is disrupted, you'll start to see it. Sundowning happens to most people who have dementia, and sometimes it's pretty predictable. Some people might begin to sundown around like 4, 5, 6 o'clock. Bring sensory supportive items. So things that might be their favorite foods, favorite tactile items, if they like a certain blanket, or if they have a comforting scent that they like. Sometimes personal pictures can be helpful. Sometimes they might be a trigger. So you'll notice there's a lot of variation. There isn't a set stone process in this, because dementia is such a personal experience. Everyone is such a unique and different personality that what happens to one person will be very different for another. That experience will present itself differently, because it kind of manifests into our personalities. Some are more relaxed, some are more anxious, so all of that plays a role. in that. So you want to have like a sensory toolkit, so to speak, when you travel. And honestly, anywhere you go on any outing, whether restaurant, whether a friend's house, whether being local, whether you're looking at a short term respite where your loved one will be in a facility for a small period of time, you want to have that sensory kit to communicate to the folks that will care for them or family members that might interact with them, um, on how to approach, some topics that you find that they like to talk about, pictures. It's really the key is educating them, letting them know, and communicating. And that will really remove any of those stressors that might come up from family interactions. Um, I'm curious if there, at the end when we have questions, if there are any family situations that you have all run into in terms of either families not understanding or you know, approaches that they might take that haven't been um, well received by your loved one, things like that. Now, in terms of the sensory part, even in your own home environments, depending on where your loved one is at, sometimes really scaling back, obviously, if there's a lot of balance issues, removing the rugs, simplifying things as much as you can. If you really want to decorate in terms of holidays and it's something that your loved one enjoys, by all means, definitely do that. If it's something you find that it agitates them, maybe it's picking one particular item that would represent that holiday for the two of you instead of having lots of different um, decor all throughout the house. So there's lots of different ways to kind of create that experience in a scaled down way. But again, it's really dependent on where your loved one is at overall. Um, is that making sense for everyone? Is that kind of answering maybe some of the questions or the situations that you guys all find yourself in? Yeah, okay. I see a lot of heads nodding. Good, good, good. Um, some of the other things with holiday, I think overall, is also just caregiver care. We spent some time right now talking about what is approaches or what you can do for your loved one. But it's also really important for caregivers to kind of recharge themselves, especially during the holidays in general can be stressful. I mean, it is a time of, fun and happiness, but it is overwhelming, period. Things get a little faster pace. There's, the hustle and bustle of family, and it's important to kind of create space and time for yourselves, making sure you are also going to your medical appointments, making sure you're making time for yourself so that you have those breaks. I love that you attend the support group because that is an enormous help for a lot of people. It's a place to connect with others who are going through similar situations. Um, and you learn so much. I think most of the experiences that I have are really just the stories from families we've worked with, that I've shared with, over the years. And it's amazing the creativity, the stamina, and determination that caregivers have to do day in and day out what is expected, when you're caring for someone else. It's not easy, overall.